All right, I'm here with Bobby Skinner, host of Giants Nation. Is that right? Did I get there? I asked you like 10 seconds ago, and I already forgot, man.
Yeah, so every time I go on a podcast, it gets wrong because it's Giants Nation Show, but that
Right.
you can't fit that into the Twitter handle. So the Twitter handle is Giants Nation Pod, but
Okay.
Giants Nation Show is what we go with.
Cool. So if I'm like looking it up on like iTunes, Giants Nation Show.
Yes, sir. That'll pop up.
Dope. Excellent. Yeah, so I'm here with Bobby Skinner, highly recommended from one of the Giants Twitter accounts that I follow. We just followed each other just now, so if he's bad at this, that's not on me. but
it's end of the season, so I'm like, my film study has basically taken a nosedive over the last month. So we'll
dude, we're all there, dude. We're all there. That's good to hear, though. I'm glad that you came on. Really helpful because it is tough to get people who are engaged at this point in the season with two losing teams. But the Giants, they've got, I feel like, some hope. I don't know. There's opinions I think are a little bit split on Jackson Dart, except he is a vibes positive guy. Like there's no question about that. But in terms of how good of a quarterback he is, like his sustainability, the ability to kind of elevate teammates. We've been talking a lot about like progressions and mechanics with McCarthy. Where do you feel that Jackson Dart is?
I think he's in a pretty good spot. Now, again, they have to hire an entire coaching staff. But I wasn't high on Jackson Dart in the draft process, and I wasn't in favor of trading up for him. So, but I also I inherently want to give a quarterback at least a second year and have some patience. But it hasn't been that case with Jackson Dart, despite that the Giants have lost 8 straight games. He's been the bright spot where he's making plays with his legs, he's extending plays, he's making tough throws against the blitz. It has not been all perfect, and you do see there's some serious areas where he needs to grow in. But he's been able to put together, even in his bad moments, last week against the Commanders was probably his worst overall game. And he had 2 touchdowns in that game and 1 interception, right? So he's limited the turnovers. He's created some sacks. That's an issue, but at the same time, I think that's better than interceptions. So I think he's in a good spot, and that's with bad weapons around him. Slayton, who I've always defended a bit, has had his worst year. Wan'Dale Robinson's having a career year, but that's kind of because somebody had to step up in the absence of Malik Neighbors. So I think he's in a good spot, but I do think this week is a huge test to see where he's at, because Brian Flores throws so much at quarterbacks. And you see even the best quarterbacks have their worst games against Minnesota.
Yeah, I do want to ask about that. One problem I've had when I've been talking to people about hey, how do you think this guy's going to do against Flores is that, sometimes you get quarterbacks that are obviously really outstanding against the blitz. You've got Jared Goff and Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert and on and on and on. They're really good against the blitz, but some of them do really poorly against the Brian Flores blitz, while some of them continue to succeed at a high level regardless of the type of blitz. And I think part of it is the volume of blitzes. He blitzes at a 60 to 70% rate, more for younger quarterbacks. Part of it is that it's a unique design for the blitz. A lot of it is, you've got the zone behind it, but it doesn't look like, the zone blitzes we saw from, those old Steelers and Packers defenses. And so it is a unique design. It's a unique, kind of volumetric load. And so some quarterbacks who do really well against the blitz do poorly against the Flores blitz, while others, whatever skill set that they have that makes them really outstanding against general blitzes from most teams, also allows them to succeed against Flores. So with all of that in mind, do you have an idea? Has he faced a lot of simulated pressure, a lot of extra pass rushers and stuff like that this early in his career that gives us an idea? Or is this just going to be we're going to find out together?
I think the only thing you can compare it to maybe is the Broncos game.
Yeah.
And even in that game, I don't think they really sent a ton. It was more just letting Hufanga, freestyle a lot, which they let him do. So this is kind of a first test for him. And I think on the Giants side, even if he fails, I don't think anybody's ringing the alarms. But it is what Dart has done against those. It's not that those disguised looks or those simulated pressures that you mentioned where Dart just diagnoses it and gets it to the ball where it needs to go, and he's fine. A lot of times that stuff does confuse him, but he's got a good feel in the pocket, whether it's like hang in there, or a scramble, that he's been able to make the most out of those make the most out of the plays where he's not seeing exactly, where he's not understanding what he's seeing. And if he's got a one-on-one matchup in those plays, you know what, I'm going to throw this ball at Theo Johnson and allow him to make a play. So I think that's where he's been good. It's not that he's diagnosing these things super quickly. It's just he's kind of making the most out of when he's wrong, not letting it be a disaster play where he just throws it where he wanted to throw it pre-snap, or, you know, taking a sack in the pocket. Most of the sacks have happened after him scrambling around a bit.
Okay. And we talked a lot, like in the national conversation about Jackson Dart's, you know, willingness to take on contact. Obviously, scrambling in the pocket is not always a choice you're making. You can always throw the ball away, but he does seem to seek out contact. This has been a point of emphasis for now, I think, both head coaches for the Giants, to try and see if they can minimize whatever's happening there. But also they want to preserve what makes him such a special player. So how has he been approaching that particular balance?
I think over the last month he's handled it well, which the storylines around it have gotten the hottest, because there was some Brian Dable garbage time quarterback power stuff where it's like, all right, well, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't be doing that on their end. And then there was moments where he is seeking out the contact. You know, we all saw the Thursday night football game of him, you know, diving headfirst into Zach Bond's chest. Yeah. The 49ers game, there was some frustration. I'm just going to try and truck a guy. And that was the stuff you can't have happen. It hasn't happened since then, but he got the concussion in that final Brian Dable game. And that was simply that he fumbled the ball on QB bash. And, you know, when he's going for the ball, he hits his head on the ground unconscious. And then you had that Patriots game where, yeah, you could get out a little earlier, but that's not a play that, you know, that's not seeking out contact or anything. And then he got pulled out of the Commanders game on a broken play where he just tried to get to the line of scrimmage, and he went down on purpose, but not for some reason. They're just oversensitive to him with the blue tent thing, right, because they messed it up in that Chicago Bears game. So the last month, he's actually been pretty responsible, but it feels like the storyline has gotten bigger and bigger as he's gotten more responsible, because guess what? Quarterbacks are going to take hits even if they are being responsible.
Right. And, you know, I mean, I've been party to this too. I'm not going to say I'm innocent of it, but it's just like, it has been kind of like a meme to just refer to him and Scadaboo as like the concussion brothers. I mean, they're crazy. I don't know what else to say.
Dart was playing up to that, right? I'm not sitting here saying, oh, this isn't made up out of nowhere. It's just, it's gotten the loudest is where he's actually been the best. You know, that Bears game where he got the concussion, you know, he was sliding a ton. Like, he didn't take any big hits in that game. So like they did have to make an emphasis of it because it was an issue. It just hasn't been an issue over the last month. Now, as I've, you know, covered Jackson Dart, and I feel like it's probably going to pop back up eventually. And right now, because it's being talked about so much, but the last month, like, it hasn't actually been an issue.
Okay. That is great to hear, because he has been such a joy to watch. So given that he's not in the division, I can kind of cheer for him to be healthy. I mean, obviously I cheer for everyone to be healthy. Let's not, but you know, it's been fun to watch him. I mentioned Cam Scadaboo, who is out, right, because of an ankle injury. And also, like, Big Dom visited him in the hospital. Who knows what happened there? But you've got Tyrone Tracy, who was a huge fan of last year. You got Devin Singletary. I mean, this is like a pretty reasonably well filled out running back room. Has it resulted in success when it hasn't been Scadaboo on the field?
Not really. Now, with Kafka, they had a couple of really run-heavy games where they would average like 3.1 yards per carry, but like they weren't having any losses. Tracy's had a down year. He's coming off his best game against the Commanders, red receiving touchdown and some good runs. But this Giants offensive line, I'm sure we'll get to that, has been pretty solid as pass protectors. As the run game, they're more just like able to sustain blocks, but they're not actually getting any movement or anything. And Tracy needs that crease, right? He needs somebody when they're running zone to, you know, pin down, the defensive tackle and give you a crease to run off of. And he hasn't had a lot of that. and he's not going to make a lot out of, breaking tackles. He's more of a one cut and go back. Singletary has been, probably at his lowest point in his career, where he's averaging like 3 yards a pop as well too. So the run game hasn't been terrible like it was early in the year, or it's not even early, just the first 3 weeks of the season with Russell Wilson at QB. Mm-hmm. But they've been able to, do the zone read stuff with Jackson Dart, the QB bash stuff, to at least keep backside defensive ends honest. And it's been like that paired with Jackson Dart's legs has led to them being like a solid rushing team.
Okay. How do they hold up in pass protection? That becomes a pretty critical element against this particular defense.
Honestly, they've been really good. With Andrew Thomas, he's a stud, and they allow him to go one-on-one all game, and he does like a great job. Like I think he'll be an all-pro left tackle this year. Mm-hmm. Second time he would have gotten that. So he's been great. Jermaine Illuminor, right tackle. He's not perfect, but man, like as far as like tackle duos, like him and Andrew Thomas are up there where he's a good pass protector. He'll have a bad player here or there, but it's not a disaster. And then the interior guys of John Runyon at left guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, and then Greg Van Roten at right guard. Neither of those guys are guys who you want just like, one-on-one with this guy. But they all are always in the right place. So there's never any type of protection bust. And I think that's such a huge part of interior pass blocking is just guys being in the right place. So they've been really good. They communicate well. There's no issues there. And when somebody on that offensive line loses, it's usually only one guy. And pair that with what Jackson Dart's been able to do, they've been able to avoid those really bad plays on the offensive line. Now, Dart has I think Dart's probably been sacked at a pretty high rate, but I think he has the second most sacks in the NFL that our QB accounted for. And that's only starting 9 games. So Dart, whenever there's pressure, it's usually a Jackson Dart accounted for. But I think that is for the Giants, who have had terrible pass protection for the last decade. Yeah, this has been by far their best group. Andrew Thomas really holds it all together when you can just let your left tackle be one-on-one all the time. And then when one of your tackles is losing, it's your right tackle here and there, and your quarterback can see that. I think it makes a huge difference compared to if you were getting that type of production from your left tackle. So they haven't been perfect, but it's been really refreshing. And in fact, talking about Jackson Dart and what you need to see from him going forward, I think something you need to see from the Giants going forward is to invest and reinvest in the offensive line to make sure he has that, because that's where I worry about if he does have an offensive line that struggles and you've got, two defenders giving you pressure at the same time. That's where you're not able to escape those plays or the pocket collapses on you. It hasn't happened for him as a rookie.
That makes sense. I know that a lot of people were excited about I think he's from Purdue, the 5th round pick, Marcus Embo. He was a very strange prospect to evaluate because of his stance. Are there any odds for him to kind of maybe take over long term down the road for him? Or do we think of him as kind of like a developmental swing guy?
I think, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what the Giants are thinking. They like to overvalue their pieces. I would go with Bo into the next season as hey, he's our swing tackle. Maybe he competes somewhere on the interior, because when he played the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, who have very weak edge groups, he looked great, right? I'm sure you watched him a little bit in the draft. He's extremely smart. His feet are extremely quick. His hand usage is great, but he's also light and has lack of arm length. And power guys like the Chiefs rushers dominated him. And so that's an issue where it's I don't know if he could play tackle full time. Maybe you have to work on the inside, but at least he can be a swing tackle for you. So I like Marcus Bo coming out a lot, but I also worried what position does he end up playing? I really think the smart move would be going into next year with him not being a chance to be a starter, unless it's hey, we bring in a center, or not bring in you let him compete with John Michael Schmitz to be the starting center, because I think that's where his frame probably lends him to the best, even though he's never played it. But there's so many good things about Marcus Bo's game. I do film breakdowns of every Giants draft pick and then pre-draft. He was the longest one that I ever did that wasn't a quarterback, because there's so much good to his game. But it's the NFL. Sometimes it is all about length and strength, and that's where he lacks.
Fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about the receivers. You mentioned you're a Darius Slayton defender. I feel like Darius Slayton does better against Minnesota, or has, than maybe I understand his reputation to be. So maybe he has performed historically better against Minnesota the past couple of years than against other teams. But I don't know. I like his game, especially for a 5th round pick. Wandale, I've never super loved, but like you're right. He's been super productive. He obviously has had to step up as a response to injury. But I'm taking a look at this Ourlads depth chart. I see Isaiah Hodgins kind of up there as a potential starter. I don't know how accurate Ourlads is. I haven't.
It is. It's accurate for that.
Okay, great. Can you tell me kind of what roles that they all play, given that they don't have, Malik Neighbors as like a true X or whatever it is, that the role that you would want him to play?
Yes, Slayton is that X right now, and he's just had his worst year with, he's always had a drop issue, but it just feels like this year it's been worse, even though, because he's dropped some like really nice Jackson Dart passes down the field. He is kind of your 50 to 60 yard per game, right? He's the guy who can run every single route, right? He's the only guy who really challenges you vertically, who can run the post and can run separated at all 3 levels. So like he's the guy you got to watch on those dagger concepts or, the backside, getting open. Wandale has had, again, a very weird year where he's very small. He's not someone you're going to use down the field a lot, but he's had a couple of those games this year against the Cowboys, right? Where they just ran verts and, they ran some basic cover too, and he's open against that. The Lions, with their heavy man coverage approach, the Giants got 2 tight ends and ran a lot of play action. He was able to win man coverage against the Lions man coverage. But other than that, Wandale is kind of your typical slot receiver where it's, we're running choice routes a lot. And I think especially against our Brian Flores defense, I think that's where you're going to see him a lot. And, if you ask me to predict a Wandale Robinson stat line in this game, I'd say 7 catches for 55 yards. But he's done more with the yak. Isaiah Hodgins hasn't done much the last couple of games with Jackson Dart, because I think Hodgins is, although a bigger body, he's not someone you're using down the field a lot, except for, post route here and there. I know the Vikings saw that in a playoff game. Mm-hmm. And I think he got a couple double moves in that regular season game that year too. But he's kind of, quick game, right? Because he's not going to separate a ton, but he's very crisp at the stem of the route. He's got a great catch radius, great hands. And then if you get in the red zone, that's the guy you probably want to target from the receiver group.
Okay. You mentioned that, against like the Lions and their man coverage setup, it was kind of easier to go to the tight ends. And I remember a year ago, 2 years ago, that like the tight ends were kind of the focus of the passing offense. And this was even, I think, pre-Theo Johnson. So it must have been 2 years ago. So I've always kind of enjoyed that tight end room, even if they never had like an elite guy over the past couple of years. Is that something that they can lean on when they're like, hey, I just don't think, wide receivers are going to be, or like 11 personnel is really going to get it done for us. We want to lean on a couple more tight ends. Or do you think that outside of Theo Johnson, there's just like not as much that can be done?
I think Bellinger's a nice like backup tight end because he's not going to do much as a receiver down the field, but he's got, good sure hands. But, he can block in line. He could be your move blocker. So he's kind of the perfect backup tight end for those 2 tight end sets. And he's not so, slow and limbering where he gives you nothing as a receiver. Like you could hit him on a corner route. And Theo Johnson being that bigger body who can, get down the field and make some tough catches. Had some tough drops this year. This happened in the Vikings game last year, which was Theo Johnson's debut. And I could see the Giants doing this very similarly this year, where because of all the chaos that Brian Flores does, is they're going to get in the 2 tight end sets and try and run the ball. I think that sometimes it simplifies the Flores defense. And the Vikings run defense hasn't been this great this year, I believe. The issue with that is you get yourself in 3rd down a lot, and that's where Brian Flores, I think, is his best. And it can work against you, even though you're simplifying things on 1st and 2nd down. But Theo Johnson has been like that security blanket for Jackson Dart. Like I said, where he's not always seeing things perfectly or, he's confused by things. But if he's got Theo Johnson, with a one-on-one, or he's, somewhere where he's not, having the fireball and the double coverage, that has been his security blanket to, throw the ball to him down the field with his 6'6" frame. He makes some really nice catches. That's kind of been the security blanket for Jackson Dart, has been Theo Johnson.
Okay. So how would you say that, like, ideally, like the offense in general is designed? Like you see it's like 1st and 10. Is it, you're probably going to run on 1st and 10, or it's going to be a play action on 1st and 10? You see country cover 2. What kind of route concepts are we most likely to see? What is Dart most likely to throw against that kind of stuff? Like, just kind of, you've got a whiteboard in front of you. How are you running this offense?
It's been a bit unpredictable with Mike Kafka. They've gotten very run heavy in some of these games, very run heavy. And with that, he's gotten run heavy, but not play actioned off it, right? Like, I think against the Packers in that first game, they ran the ball 30 plus times. They only ran play action 4 times. In the Lions game, they got ran heavy in the play action off again. With Dart, they run a lot of post wheel. It's just like they run a million different variations. In fact, sometimes if I'm at an event this offseason and Dart's there and I get the interview for a question, I'm going to ask them, like, how many different variations of post wheel did you guys run? Because they've run it in a million different ways.
Who's running the wheel route? Is it
everybody? Like that's what I'm saying. Everything. They could be the running back from the backfield. It could be Darius Slayton, the tight end Theo Johnson. Like, I think every single thing, and that's, Mike Kafka can't reinvent the entire offense, and right. Brian Dable that's part of like the Brian Dable influence. Is like we run the same concepts, we just put different people in different spots in them. So like there's been a ton of that. They've tried to get into a little more of the under center play action, Yankee, the deep post and the over. I think that's where Dart has probably struggled his most consistently, is, having to snap his head around and find the open guy. I think that's where some of the Baker Mayfield comps can come together, where it's like usually guys benefit from play action. I think Dart struggles much more with play action because he's not able to see what's happening. Mm-hmm. But they do try to run that a ton. And, they'll run seams but post wheel, they run that shock concept where, we have the, empty the stay route, the slot fade, and then the choice route. So they run a ton of that, and they can put whatever they want on the backside of that. So post wheel has been like their bread and butter, where they're just getting into that a ton.
Awesome. Outstanding, man. This has been great. So defensive side of the ball, they booted Shane Bowen. They bring in Charlie Bullen. Great for audio listeners to hear the difference between those two names. But we mentioned, I asked you before the show, like kind of what may have changed here. And you said there may have been some changes, but that's probably going to happen in the offseason more than anything else. But just kind of give us a good understanding of what the Bowen defense looks like. And if there have been any tweaks to Bullen taking over, kind of what that looks like.
So if you look at like Giants, like coverage breakdown things, you say, oh, they run so much cover one. The first 5 games of the season, they almost ran it exclusively. They're running, and they've gotten away from it. And like most teams, they run cover 3 from, right. Split safety, and then, have the safety come down and sit in the curl hook zone. But with Bullen, where they've gotten a little more aggressive, is more just, some zero blitzes from, a standard, 4-2 alignment. They'll do that here and there. They've thrown in some fired zones on third down. And just, I think if there's anything they try and do differently, it's just like running inverted coverages, where you're, get into single high, you have the safety, become like that Tampa defender and have the corners bail into it, like some inverted Tampa 2. So that's where they get a little different with it, but they kind of just cycle through, cover 1, cover 3 for the most of the game. And then they'll throw some of those inverted looks, surprise looks on third down. Like I said, they've gotten a little more aggressive, but they've also gotten burned by that, where you can see where some of the you can see where Shane Bowen previously probably was hesitant to do that because of the mental mistake. Against the Patriots, which was Bowen's first game as the DC, they ran a zero blitz at the end of the first half. But whichever way the running back went, the linebacker was supposed to pick that up. They get confused by it, and, the running back leaks out and gets, a 40-yard gain. So they've gotten more aggressive with it, but they're not reinventing the wheel. It's mostly your basic cover 3 from split safety or bring the safety down.
Okay. If there were a strength to the Giants defense, I don't want to be too mean, but I got to start with an if, right? It would be the pass rush despite not having Kayvon Thibodeau, right? I feel like Brian Burns has been doing excellently. We've seen a little bit more from Abdul Carter. Dexter Lawrence, still a great pass rusher. I don't know. Is that accurate? Am I overselling it? If this feels like a decent pass rush.
It's accurate, but they haven't lived up to what they should be.
Okay.
Where Brian Burns has had a career year, but Burns has always been a guy who kind of doesn't have games where he's just totally dominating, right? Where he'll have a few plays per game, but he's not that dominant force. This year he's done that, and he's created those sacks. Abdul Carter, I think, has been the most consistent, despite the one being under the spotlight the most, because he hadn't gotten the counting stats of sacks and tackles for a loss. He's the guy who I do my, weekly film reviews. And I'm like, this is the guy who I think week to week is just winning his matchups more. And I would expect Darisaw is not going to play on Sunday. And I think that's where the Vikings probably get some issues. It's just whoever's lining up with that left tackle, whether it's Carter or Brian Burns. Dex has been quiet where he still gets double teamed a lot. He's the most respected player on the thing, but he hasn't won any of those double teams. And in the run game, when he does have a one-on-one, he's not getting moved or anything, but he's not dominating the way that the Vikings fans have seen before. And even in the past game, he's not dominating those one-on-ones. So he'll win. He's better than 90% of the defensive tackles in the NFL anymore. But what made Dex so great is he was better than 98% of them the previous 3 seasons. So none of those guys, except for Brian Burns, has really lived up to what exactly we were getting for. Carter's a rookie. I think he's had a fine rookie season. Just again, he hasn't gotten the total sack numbers, and those do matter, even though you try and look at what this guy's doing on a consistent basis and not just on 12 to 15 plays per year. But that's where they can win, and that's where they've won 2 games. The one win was because they just dominated the banged up Chargers offensive line.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. You mentioned, blitzing a little bit more under Bullen. I looked up the splits just now while we were talking, and you weren't kidding. Holy crap! The blitz rate for the Giants under Bowen was about average, 17th in the NFL according to Next Gen Stats, and the blitz rate now is 2nd in the NFL from Week 13, so small sample, but 2nd in the NFL at 49%. So who is it that's assisting this pass rush on these blitzes when they are sending blitzes?
Okereke is probably their guy. Drew Phillips, the nickel corner, they'll send here and there as well too. He's an aggressive young corner. He can over pursue it a lot of the times as well too. But it's usually what they like to do is they'll put Dex at nose tackle, Abdul and Brian Burns on the edge. And they'll have Bobby Okereke and then maybe another outside. They'll put a third outside linebacker in the B gaps and kind of just making you guess who's going to go there. Or they'll have either one of Burns or Carter in the B gap and then another one, Fox or whoever their other Golston, their other outside linebacker out there, and just basically trying to stunt the front with that. Like I said, the last 2 weeks is where they've kind of put everybody up on the line, similar to some of the Florida stubs, where they'll send a fire zone where they'll blitz Phillips and drop out, Brian Burns on the backside. So, but Bobby Okereke, I guess, would probably be the middle linebacker, probably be the guy who gets sent the most on blitzes.
Okay. Outside of blitzes, what does that linebacker unit look like? How are they performing when you've got them manned up in coverage against running backs and tight ends? How are they performing reading their keys and stopping the run and stuff like that?
They've been pretty terrible. Now, they're not being put on tight ends very often. They're almost exclusively covering the running back, when they're in man coverage. But in their zone, it's been very predictable where you can throw past their ears. They're not reading route combinations and undercutting anything. They're very reactive. In the run game, I will benefit, give them a little bit of the benefit of that. The defensive tackle group is terrible. And they align their defensive ends very wide to allow them to rush the passer. And that's why they've been, the second worst rush defense in the NFL this year. But they've been Okereke has been really bad this year, been very, very slow, reactive. And then Micah McFadden, their other guy's been injured the entire year. And they've just had bad players there, whether it's Darius Moasau, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. They just have guys who really don't do anything for you. And then you pair that with the DBs all being pretty bad in run support outside of maybe Javon Holland. And it's led to like a terrible run defense that has been bad for some years and gotten worse.
Yeah, I think by EPA per play, they're the worst run defense in the NFL. Which, I mean, like, they're up against a team that doesn't like to run the ball. So, who's to say how bad that is?
That was always the benefit that year, the playoffs, Giants and Vikings, was the Giants' run defense was terrible, but they were actually pretty good against zone runs. And I was just like, why doesn't Kevin O'Connell do anything besides zone against this team? And like, those are the only two good run defense games were those games.
That's incredible. For what it is worth, the Vikings have transitioned to having a lot more gap style running, a lot more duo than they had in the past. Zone runs seem to be just at above league average. So, but I don't know. I mean, it sounds like the run defense problem for the Giants has expanded from gap runs to all runs.
Oh yeah, it's everything now. That was a very 2022 thing. Now it's just terrible in every type of scheme that they're facing. Like you said, duo, Dexter Lawrence. If there's one thing I could point to and say he's much worse is, he's not winning double teams in the run game, where he used to do that and keep his linebackers free or even just win those on his own. That hasn't happened. The rest of the defensive tackle group is terrible, whether they're on the front side run or the back side of the run. Burns and Carter have been trying to, rush the passer, so they'll, take themselves out of plays. The linebackers been slow, and again, the DBs have been maybe the worst part of it, which is crazy to think about. So, like, they've been bad in every single type of rushing offense they face. When they face bad rushing offenses this year, they give up like 120 yards.
Jesus. Who knows? Maybe Kevin O'Connell will run the ball. Anything is possible. Well, let's talk a little bit about these DBs outside of just what sounds like catastrophically poor run support. So again, as we were talking, I was looking up like the coverage splits, before and after Bowen, and like you said, running cover one at the highest rate in the league per next gen stats, running single high safety looks about the fifth highest in the league. It's hard to beat the Steelers there. And since then, kind of league average across a lot of things, except, a little bit more cover four than the league average now, but not before, and virtually no cover six. So that's kind of what the shells have looked like, but how does that like play out? What situations do they like playing particular coverages? How do they adapt to the opposing quarterbacks and so on? Yeah,
I mentioned a little bit before, like basically it's with Bowen, it's been a little more cover four, like you mentioned. It's mostly, like I said, cover one and cover three on first and second down, depending on if they're coming at that from single high or split safety. Those are the ways that they like to run it. And they'll, have the safety come down, play the middle of the field while they, have the running back or linebackers cover the running backs most of the time. Cordell Flott has been very good.
Really?
Very good this year. It's been surprising how, like, he's just, like, you kind of keep on waiting for it to fall apart a little bit, and he's been very good this year. Now, I know Jefferson hasn't had his best year, but I think he's just a different, level of player, no matter if you're playing good or not. Mm. Paulson Adebo has struggled. They like to put him in man coverage, and he's a man coverage corner, likes to play from trail. He's just gotten beat consistently, and he hasn't had the ball production that he had in previous years where he was able to make up for. In New Orleans, he was never a guy who didn't give up yards or didn't have penalties, but he made you pay for it with pass breakups and turnovers. That just hasn't happened this year. Drew Phillips in the slot, whenever he's in man coverage, I mean, that's who I would be looking to pick on. Like he's over aggressive at the line of scrimmage, and he falls behind. And then when he falls behind, he commits penalties or just gets beat. And then the safeties, Newman and Belton, they've rotated because Newman has struggled so much. And then Holland has been what Holland has been over the last couple of years. People say it's the scheme, but he's just a reactive player. He prevents the big play all the times, but he's not a playmaker at all. And this I think that's where they really don't have any guys who are playmakers on the ball, except for Paulson Adebo, and he just hasn't had that this year.
So I'm wondering if part of the Paulson Adebo approach, and I'm doing this research live, so excuse me, has been I thought that they ran a fair amount of man coverage in New Orleans with him, but they haven't actually. So just like a kind of a curious way to deploy a newly acquired cornerback. I don't know. Did that strike you as kind of a mismanagement of resources?
I think for Paulson Adebo to be at his best, you have to let him cheat, which is, get overly aggressive with leverage, allow him to make plays, but then you have to give, make sure the safety is helping over the top. And they've kind of left him isolated, and they'll leave help over on Flott's side, which has helped Flott play better and play more aggressive. But it's been simple one-on-ones. And that's where he's gotten consistently beat. It's just basic man coverage. And down the field, when he has been in good, in phase and in trail, he just hasn't made the plays on the football that he's had in previous years with the Saints. I know he had the broken leg, and maybe that's just what it is. But he's always had some of these issues, but he's been able to make up for it.
If you were kind of assisting the Vikings' offensive game plan for this week, what are kind of the points that you would want the Vikings to emphasize, or maybe like just in terms of like the ways to deal with blitzes, or kind of what route combinations seem to work well, or like what are things to kind of watch out for that are like Giants tendencies?
I mean, I not to get too simplistic, run the ball. Like this is very bad run defense. And like I said, get diverse with it, because if you get them to key in on, this is what you do, then any coach can get their guys keyed in on it. But, with Abdul Carter, kind of bet on him working upfield in some of these runs, right? He did better against Washington, and hopefully that's something he continues to build on. But like kind of bet on the B gap being a little wider than you might think pre-snap. Get your two hands on Dexter Lawrence and just test these linebackers, because they're not going to make much plays. And that's where in the passing game, when they're in their zone coverages, middle of the field, attack them. They're just not, none of those guys are making plays. When you get man coverage, you basically can open up any route that you want against Drew Phillips and Paulson Adebo, and you're able to win. So, Phillips being in the slot, Adebo on the outside. When you get those man coverage looks, those have been big winners. And even if you think that your guy's not open, they commit penalties. So I would be giving those guys opportunities, whether it's Naylor or Jefferson. I think the Vikings probably use everybody in the slot a little bit. That's where I would look at, was like a look to attack those two guys. I would avoid Flott a bit. And then as far as passing, like just passing concepts, Dagger has worked fairly well against them, and just kind of whatever man beaters you're looking for.
I'm looking at the special teams area. What is going on? What's the deal? Who are the specialists?
Well, that's a week-to-week thing for the Giants.
Okay.
And I'm not joking. I think this will be like the 6 different kicker punter combination they have.
That's a crazy stat to have to keep track of, by the way.
Yeah, so this will be the 4th kicker they've used. They're using Ben Sauls, who's a UDFA out of Pitt.
The left-footed one, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's for a Giants fan who doesn't have much to be invested in this for the rest of these last 3 games. He is one of those people I am invested in, because they brought Graham Gano back, even though they could have saved like $3 million in cap space. After the last 2 years, he had been hurt and injured, injured and bad the last 2 years. Well, he came back and got injured twice in this season. Then they used their international exempt player, Jude McAtamney, who was the backup kicker at Rutgers, sent him out there. That went terrible. They lose the Broncos game in part because of that. Then Younghoe Koo comes back. We all saw Monday Night Football, him not kick the ball because the punter didn't handle it correctly.
Yeah, it sounded like he did that on purpose.
He did do it on purpose because he didn't want to have a missed field goal because of a bad hold. Well, that got the punter injured on that play because he had to go and get tackled.
Oh.
And so they brought in Cameron Johnston, who, if you don't know him, he's the guy who every year when he gets released in camp, everyone reports it because he looks like Bill Burr.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He hit a line drive. They got a return touchdown last week off of that. The week before they got a return touchdown. And then Younghoe Koo I was at my first game last week, and I was, in the end zone to the left, and Younghoe Koo just kicked him directly at me both times. So Younghoe Koo is now gone. And the return game, I can't tell you who's going to return. It's different, somebody different every week. Gunnar Olszewski has been the consistent. He was in concussion protocol. I think he'll be back this week. And then the second guy next to them, I actually think they've used like 7 different people, whether it's Jalen Hyatt. Deontay Banks has actually become that guy, really? I guess, when Gunnar Olszewski's back.
Man, I liked Deontay Banks coming out. I feel so stupid.
So I didn't love him, but his rookie season was overrated in the moment, like a lot of rookies seasons are. Mm-hmm. But he's gotten much worse, where he's unplayable. Like, in fact, one of the more mind-numbing things at the beginning of the year is they were rotating him with Cordell Flott, and anytime he would come in, they would just target him and something bad would happen. And so it's his career is basically over with the Giants.
Whew. Man, that's rough. Okay, so I believe. Hold on, let me just look this up because I might as well just get it right. I believe, yeah. So we don't have a line. The Vikings opened as 2.5-point favorites, but I can't actually see a current line. I'm sure it's something similar to that.
I put together spread picks for our preview show, and I saw it at 2.5 as well. So
okay, great. Do you think that's fair? Do you think the Vikings are about a little bit better, or especially because they're traveling in their favorites, or do you think that there's like some opportunities here for the Giants to kind of steal a little bit back?
Here's the only place I look at it is I know McCarthy has been good the last 2 games.
Yeah, sure.
But he was, and like you said, I'm at the point now where I'm not studying film with the other team anymore. The Cowboys defense, I just watched Russell Wilson have a career high against them and, be the worst version of himself in every other moment that he's had.
Yeah.
Commanders, I think are, they're bad, but they're not the type of bad where it's just the easiest thing I ever faced. And I think Dallas kind of is that. But McCarthy obviously had a really bad year overall. And then you put Justin Skule at left tackle against Carter or Burns. I think that's where the Giants can find a way. Offensively, I think it's going to be a big struggle for them against the Vikings. And I think the Giants, like I said before, are going to kind of bite themselves by, like I said, I think they're going to get a heavy personnel and try and run the ball, but they're not a great rushing offense. I think that's just going to put them in a lot of third downs. So I think offensively, they're not going to find a ton of success. Defensively, it's simple as like, can McCarthy make throws and your left tackle block? Like, I think it's as simple as that. If they can have their average games, I think they put up 24, 27 points.
All right. That's fair enough, man. Where can people find you?
Giants Nation Show. Like I said, it's usually I feel like we're a good place for the opposing team to listen to the preview pod. That is not the case this last month of the season where we're more talking big picture things. Mm-hmm. But Giants Nation Show, we do film breakdowns for the draft and stuff. So that will be rolling out. We'll be at the Senior Bowl, full coverage from there. So if you're into the draft stuff, that's where you can get that.
Hell yeah. I might see you at Senior then. Really glad that I reached out and got you in. I didn't listen to a single episode of your podcast before I invited you on, so I was ready for anything. It could have been awful. No, this is fantastic, dude.
If you watched the last one, you probably would have been scared off because I went up to the game and we decided like, you know what? Let's have a little fun with this. We did the podcast in the back of our rental truck. In the dark after a snowy game.
Yes.
So it's visually you would have been like, oh, why did I get suggested to this podcast? But for the most part, we try and do a good job.
No, I love it, dude. That's great. I mean, James and I have the producer and co-host of the show, have done podcasts at the back of cabs and like while driving and stuff like that. Don't worry about it. Dude, that rules, man. Thanks so much for coming on, especially short notice. Yeah, I mean, awful year for both teams. Here's to waiting for next year, man.
Yeah, you know what, you say that, and it's like I looked at the Vikings of like 6 wins. Like that's like our second best season in the last decade.
Jesus. Okay. No, fair enough. Yeah, yeah. The Vikings are slumming it and are experiencing some real feedback from that.
Yeah. So we'll see. I guess it's whichever quarterback works out better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
that's at least one thing I have to hold on to for the whole offseason.
All right, man. Peace out.
All right, thank you, man.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.